Two teams that don't see a lot of each other are heading for Great American Ballpark. Well, one of them lives there. The other one, Toronto Blue Jays, they're heading down to Cincinnati to face the Cincinnati Reds. This is going to be a fun series because I think this pits a team that is a couple of years ahead of where the Reds are right now, and the Reds hope to get to where the Jays are currently. We're going to talk all about that here on today's Locked On Reds, Locked On Blue Jays crossover. I am Jeff Carr, one half of Locked On Reds. My co-host Steve Offenbaker will not be with us here today, but joining me, and I'm joining him, Craig Ballard, Locked On Blue Jays. Really happy to have you, Craig.
Hello, friends. Yes, indeed. Craig Ballard, Locked On Blue Jays. June 20th, 2014. That's the last time the Toronto Blue Jay fan base enjoyed a victory in Cincinnati. Now, we haven't been back there since 24. I mean, don't get me wrong. And since he did win the next two in that series, I mean, don't get me wrong there. But yes, to your point about two teams that don't get together a whole lot, well, this is the new reality, right, Jeff? We've got the balanced schedule now. We're going to be seeing more of each other.
It's going to be a lot of fun, and yes, this is. I mean, that's one opposite end of the spectrum. That was when the Reds were heading down into the doldrums. Now we all believe, and I think we're right to believe that they're heading out of the doldrums. So we'll talk a lot about that. Craig and I are both lifelong fans of our team. If you can't tell by referencing 2014 to start that is letting you know we love our teams. And we've been doing this every day, all season long. You can catch your Jays information on Locked On Blue Jays. You can catch your Reds information on Locked On Reds because we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we've got a great conversation coming up here with a couple of different comparisons. I want to look at the star for the Jays and the budding star for the Reds and kind of compare those two guys. We're going to give you key players to watch in this series. And before we do all of that, I wanted to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app today. Swing for the fences on Sleeper picks, and you could win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app. It's the #1 sports app on the App Store, and use promo code LOCKEDON. You'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. And Craig, what I want to check out today, because everyone in Cincinnati is really excited about Ellie De La Cruz.
I guess so.
Really excited about a couple of different guys, but the Blue Jays have experienced that excitement. And for the past couple of years, looking ahead for the next 5 years, let's pretend there's no contract situations. Both these guys are signed for the next 5 years, period, plain and simple. Who would you take, Vlad or Ellie?
Well, I mean, that's the #1 thing I would look at is the contract. So you've taken that off the table because I love Ellie on the rookie. You've taken that off the table. I still may surprise you here, Jeff. It's Ellie. I mean, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. he's not a 4-letter word in the Blue Jay fan base right now, but that's where his arrow is pointed. The Toronto Blue Jay fan base, the majority, and I always enjoy having these crossover conversations because I notice that the other fan bases are still viewing Vlad as Vlad, as that Vlad that we thought he would be. Toronto Blue Jays, as you said, Jim, living it every single pitch. Toronto Blue Jay fans will tell you, wait a minute. This guy has been an absolute disappointment. 48 home runs in 2021, 50 since. We just crossed over. We just crossed over the 75% mark of this season. So the season and 3 quarters that have followed the 48 home runs, 50 total. I was doing the math on this, Jeff. If you take the 2021, because they played at TD Ballpark, that's not a major league ballpark, and they played in Buffalo, not a major league. It was the COVID season, one of the 2 COVID seasons, I should say. Well, if you take Vlad's numbers out of those ballparks, then his career, he's hitting about 270, and he's on pace for about 28 to 29 home runs a season. Now, there are a ton of big league players that we would say, oh my God, can they sign up for that right now? Like, holy cow, hey, Ma, did you see what I did? Like, there's a ton of big league players where that flies. Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s potential, Jeff, that is not acceptable. What we've seen from Vlad this season, not acceptable. He's hitting like 238, something like that since the All-Star break. Again, not acceptable. He's hitting in that 3 spot in the Blue Jays lineup. He's had numerous signature moments, opportunities this season. laid an egg every single time. I think it may surprise you to find out, Jeff, the Blue Jay fan base is a little bit down on Vladimir Guerrero Jr. right now, and I just don't see anything to be down on from Ellie right now. I mean, what aspect of the game do you covet? He's going to hit. He's going to hit. Yes, he's going to run. He's defense. My goodness. I mean, first basemen have to prepare themselves mentally for that throw that's about to come from this guy's arm. Like what else do you want from this guy? So next 5 years, it may surprise you, Jeff. I'm going Ellie.
That is surprising. And I guess I hadn't looked that deep into it, but you're right. Vlad's biggest asset is his power. And if his power hasn't quite been there the way it was in 2021, because I remember the Reds played them in was it last year in Toronto?
Yes.
Because
Jays took 2 out of 3.
The saddest part about that is the only thing I remember about that series is that the Reds had to start Taylor Motter at third base because they had a couple of guys that weren't vaccinated and couldn't cross the border.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
and he made a couple big errors, didn't he? I think he made a couple of big errors that led to Blue Jays wins. Actually, yeah, a good memory for me, not so good for you, I guess, Jeff. Okay,
it's a little bit of a nightmare, but no, it's funny that's what I remember about that. But yeah, no, and thinking about Vlad, like I'm like, okay, he's a consistent force in the middle of your lineup. I bet this would be an interesting comparison. But so, who would you say Bo Bichette then maybe would be a little bit of a closer comparison?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, a great call. Absolutely, yes. Bo Bichette. Now, speaking of key players we're looking forward to this weekend, it's very possible that Bo Bichette walks back in the door. I know you guys are looking forward to Hunter Green, so we'll get into that. I know we'll get into that, but it's very possible that Bo Bichette's about to walk back in the door for the Toronto Blue Jays, and giddy is the way to describe the Blue Jay fan base about that. When that injury happened, the only cause for optimism is he did gingerly, but he did walk off on his own. But boy, oh boy, it looked bad. If you could have stop time and forced me to bet one way or the other, I'd be betting a ton. Season over, and let's hope we get a full season in 2024. That's how bad it looked. So just to have him coming back is massive. Bo in 2021 and 2022, each of those seasons he played 159 games. Obviously, that's not on the table this season with the injury, but I went back last night, actually, just wanted to see. So I looked at his last 159 games. Bo's hitting 331 in his last time. I mean, is that good, Jeff? Is that good?
Yeah.
He's been out injured for a while now, and he's still, for the third straight season, going to lead the league in hits. I mean, is that good? And I was looking at his defense as well, because that's always going to be the knock from Bo is the defense. Ton of errors. Now, in 21 and 22, he made an error every 24 chances. This season, it's an error every 39 chances. So his defense is developing before our eyes, and the offense, ever since September of last season, this kid at the plate has been a video game.
Nice. That's something that I'm looking forward to seeing, because you're right. I did see the videos of that injury, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is a key dude to go down that way. But no, that's a good thing, because when you look at how he has hit, and when you look at what you hope Ellie can do, but he's not quite there just yet. The one knock against Ellie, and then I'm pretty sure there's somebody down in the comments section that is saying he strikes out too much. He strikes out a lot. He's got some plate discipline learning to do, I believe. But when he learns that, it's not as if he's going to become an everyday major league player. He's going to become a great major league player. His floor is so much higher than players that we're used to, because there's lots of fans that want to compare him to failed projects of years past, and he's nowhere near that, because he is so good at everything else, like you said. And that's the one knock, though, is like, how can he kind of hone his plate discipline, hone his game strategy, in-game understanding? That's just going to come with experience. And I think that that's something we will see as the year progresses and as we get into next year. But I kind of found that to be an interesting exercise because of the way that the Jays have kind of come up in these last few years, and they've built themselves from within. They've made some big moves, don't get me wrong. I mean, Jose Barrios and all that, but they've also done a very good job of building their core from within. Now, that means that there's plenty to watch in this series outside of just Ellie De La Cruz, Bo Bichette, and Vladimir Guerrero. We are going to dive into that coming up next. Before we do, though, I want to tell you about our sponsor today, and that is Sleeper. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Sleeper, who wants to give you the chance to win 100 times your money Man, that sounds pretty good right
That'll
there.
work. Yeah, that'll work.
You get that kind of payout. I don't know who doesn't want that. And you could do that on just 2 or more fantasy baseball picks. Sleeper now offers up to 100 times payouts for up to 8 pick contest. All you have to do is choose as many as 8 players that you like. You know, maybe you say Ellie, Bo, Vlad. Maybe you pick I don't know, looking at Matt McClain. Maybe pick a couple of guys. Pick your favorite stats. Go more or less on those stats, like homers, strikeouts, hits, and more, and then get your picks right, and you could win big. Check them out today. They are the number one sports app on the App Store. And like I said, you can pick your favorite players and go more or less on your favorite stats. Plus, entries can be made in 30 seconds or less. It's that easy. Plus, if you want your money quickly, they can do that too. Safe and fast withdrawals. Use the promo code Locked On, and you'll also get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. So you get 100 times your money on your bets. You get a $100 match. Check out Sleeper today, number one sports app in the store. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. Yeah, that's, looking at this series, there's going to be so many prop bets, so many sleeper picks that you could make. And if you can't be down at the ballpark, you can catch every pitch of the Reds' hometown broadcast and the Blue Jays' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search Blue Jays or Reds. And by the way, Craig, this Friday night game, the very first game, it's Yacht Rock Review. We've got a band, a really, really good cover band that covers a bunch of yacht rock songs. And because of that, the Reds are giving out Reds captains hats to the first so many fans. I forget, 10, 20, whatever it is, 1,000 people that show up. And very much looking forward to getting my captain. I don't know what shirt is actually going to go with or if I'm going to look silly, but I'm wearing it on Monday's podcast. I can't wait.
Well, it's easy to be excited for you on that, Jeff. In Blue Jay land, we're disgruntled because Friday is an Apple TV game. So I'm glad you have something to look forward to.
Yeah, I'm going to be down at the ballpark. We'll have to deal with that one. It's weird, the broadcasting, the way that they've kind of divvied that up. It's just like, just lift the blackouts. That's all we need you to do. Don't put it on every stream. Yeah. Anyway, speaking of watching the game, there's plenty of players to get excited about outside of the key ones that we talked about in the first segment with Ellie and Vlad and Bo Bichette. When you look at the pitching matchups in this series, and Friday, the Reds starter is TBD right now. They have Brandon Williamson on Saturday. They have Hunter Green on Sunday. So much talent on the mound for the Blue Jays in this series. I was kind of hoping we'd get to see Yusei Kikuchi, but we just missed getting to see him. But overall, let's start with that. Let's start with the pitching side. Who is the most excited player for you? Because I think you know who it is for me, but who's the most excited Blue Jay you're to see on the mound?
Well, shout out to the Hound on the mound on Saturday. I've loved having Chris Bassett be a Toronto Blue Jay, but really, Sunday is full of intrigue. It is a very pleasant surprise for me that the Blue Jays are getting any production. I thought Hyunjin Ryu was finished. I thought he was finished. I'm excited to be seeing any production from Hyunjin Ryu. Now, thanks to one of our sponsors, Game Time, I was at I bought tickets. I went to his the season debut against Baltimore. Boy, oh boy, did not like what I saw. I liked the curveball. That was the end of the list of what I liked. It was his first start back. Okay. Now, his next two, he's on a streak right now. He'll go in Sunday's start, Jeff, on a streak of 12 and a third innings in a row without allowing an earned run. So he's not just back, he's performing. He's made it so Alek Manoah is not even on this roster anymore. That's the whole Alek Manoah season is the reason for the bald head. But anyway, yeah. But I'm really looking forward to see if Ryu can continue to contribute. And Friday nights, tonight's starter, Jose Barrios. There wasn't a worse ERA in the league last season than Jose Barrios. He's top dozen this season, probably going to finish in the top 10. He had a string of, I think it was 8 starts in a row that ended a couple starts back, but he had 8 starts in a row where he had lowered his ERA. Are you kidding me? The first 2 starts of the season for Jose Barrios, he allowed 8 earned runs and 4 earned runs. He was 2022 bad, Jose Barrios, in the first 2 starts. He's had 22 starts since then, Jeff, and his ERA is 2.27. Is that good? On its own, that's good. Let alone, this is right on the heels of the worst ERA in the league. So massive shout out to Jose Barrios. I'm very excited. And anytime and it's every game these days, right? No such thing as a complete game these days. But this Blue Jay bullpen has become very exciting, and a couple of familiar faces in your NL Central world. Yenesis Cabrera has been fantastic for the Toronto Blue Jays, and Jordan Hicks. I mean, there's no such he doesn't have a 3-up, 3-down inning in him. There's no such thing as that. Well, I shouldn't say that. He got one the other, but you know what I mean. He doesn't often have the clean innings, but he's electric and he is fun to watch.
Yeah, both those guys on the Cardinals really did damage to the Reds lineup. Yenesis Cabrera because of the left side, and then Hicks is a dude that whenever he's got runners on, he is the most annoying pitcher. One of the most annoying. There's a lot of annoying pitchers to face, but he's one of the most annoying pitchers to face because he gives you hope. And you know how hope can really be damaging.
Oh, no.
He gives you hope because there's guys on base. You're like, oh, hey, come back, coming. No, he strikes out the side. Then it's fine.
Yeah, strikes out the side, by the way, in 104.3, painted on the corner, by the way. Yeah.
Yes. So it's going to be interesting. I do remember in the 2022 series, I believe we faced Hyun-Jin Ryu, and he was in the midst of a strange season, but he worked the Reds because there's something about that off-speed stuff that really just gets to the Reds lineup usually. However, this is a much different team than it was last year. So I'll be interested to see how that goes. Overall, this Reds lineup, when it faces this Blue Jays pitching staff, is going to be a bit of an enigma. How about I talk? Last two games, they were shut out against Logan Allen, the rookie, and they absolutely destroyed Noah Syndergaard and scored 7 runs in game 2 against the Guardians. So I'm not really sure what to expect right now because during the middle of the summer, this team was scoring runs in bunches, and here over the last 2 weeks, the lineup has become very inconsistent. So I'm going to be curious to see how they respond to these top flight pitchers because, yes, Barrios, Bassett, Ryu have done it in some capacity for their entire careers. On the Reds pitching side, yes, I am absolutely pumped about Hunter Green's return because Hunter Green returning means that Luke Weaver is no more. Luke Weaver was DFA'd the other day. Look, and he is a guy that I'm sure he's very nice. Probably
shout out to the Weaver family, right? Yeah, shout out to the Weaver family.
Maybe he has a very nice stamp collection. I don't know. But at the end of the day, he was terrible on the mound for the Reds. Absolutely everything said. And we talked about it yesterday, so I won't go through all the stats. But during this year, he's made 22 starts. And in the first inning of those 22 starts, opposing batters had a 396 average against him and a 730 slugging against him in the first inning.
I didn't even know slugging could go that high. Holy moly.
Yeah, I know, right? So you get Hunter Green back. Hunter Green, it's not going to be that bad. Now, he might not be ace Hunter Green level for his first start, but he's definitely going to be much, much better than that. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he brings to the table on Sunday. And then the other thing for me about Brandon Williamson is that we really have seen a lot of great stuff from him recently. He started off the year very much looking like a rookie, very much looking a little bit, is he going to stick? Is he going to not? And here recently, he's righted the ship in a big way. So how does he do against this Toronto Blue Jays lineup that is so potent and then can score runs in bunches itself? So I'm very interested to see that. And I'm not interested to see the bullpen. The bullpen is scaring the crap out of me recently because they're so overused. They have so many guys that lead the league in appearances. And don't get me wrong, Alexis Diaz has been electric and I have loved it. But looking at him from an objective point of view, this is the time to face him right now. In the middle of June was not. In the middle of June, he was dominating guys, shutting them down, 1, 2, 3, get you out as quick as possible, get the save, get home. Now he has turned into the version of a closer that just makes you sweat a lot. He's not quite for Reds fans of a certain age that remember David Weathers. He's not there. He's definitely much better than that, but he's starting to give you the, goosebumps every time he comes in, and not the excited goosebumps, the worried goosebumps. So we'll see exactly how this pitching really, because both this team's lineups we know can score a lot. And I think that, outside of Vlad and Bo, who is the number one guy that you're looking for to kind of either take this series and run with it or maybe even bounce back in this series?
First of all, I just want to mention real quick, because I know a lot of fantasy baseball fans will appreciate this. On Sunday, I'm trying to thread that needle because I have Hunter Green on my fantasy team. So I'm so happy to have him come back, but I'd love him to get back to being Hunter Green as of his next start. But okay, yes. Definitely Brandon Belt. His April, literally, Jeff, either one of us could have had a better April. And I'm talking literally. It hit like 160. So anyway, but since then, he's hitting about 280 in the last 3.5 months, hitting about 280. His on base percentage is over 400. And I'm going to say right now, and this was a Locked On Blue Jay from beginning. One of the very first videos I did for Locked On Blue Jays, Jeff, just before the season started, I made a video about how Whit Merrifield needs to be the X factor for this Toronto Blue Jay team. Mission accomplished. He has been sensational. George Springer has struggled mightily. George Springer been a leadoff hitter his whole life. George Springer's out of the leadoff spot. Whit Merrifield into the leadoff spot, and he's continued to hit. His nickname is 2-Hit Whit. We've seen 3 and 4-hit Whit, if you can believe that, often this season. So very, very excited to see Whit Merrifield. There's nothing that could happen this weekend that's going to be more exciting than seeing Bo Bichette come back. I'll say that. And the last one I'll mention, because he's just been deplorable at the plate, sensational as advertised defensively, but Dalton Varsho at the plate has been such a nightmare. But lately, he's coming on a little bit. And Locked On Blue Jay everydayers will know we're constantly deep diving the pitching matchup in the ballpark as it compares to Dalton Varsho. We're constantly looking for, hey, is this a pitcher? Is this a ballpark that could kickstart Dalton Varsho? These guys have never played in this ballpark before, right? So hopefully that's some cause for optimism for the Toronto Blue Jays that this will be, can work out to be a hitter's ballpark for them, especially as we talked about earlier, especially as this is the ballpark they're going to be going to for the next several years to come.
Yeah. Every other year? It's like a home and home every other year or something like that. So yeah, it's exciting to know that this is going to happen a lot more often. And looking at the way that the lineup shakes up for the Reds, like Matt McLain had a beautiful night last night. I mean, we are still buzzing from what TJ Friedl and Matt McLain both collectively did in the 1-2 spot. That 1-2 punch might become very interesting moving forward. The Reds have had a little bit of a lineup shakeup here recently. Up until last week, Ellie was leading off for a bit, and I think that eventually that's where he's going to slot into. It's just his plate discipline does not make him a very good leadoff hitter right now, but TJ Friedl is the best dude at getting on base for this team. Will Benson might be second best only because he hasn't played near as much as TJ Friedl is, but TJ Friedel's going to get on base. Matt McLain's going to do whatever he can to get him around and over and in, and then you've got the middle of the order that can do so many different things with Ellie, Steer, and Encarnacion Strand that are just going to be able to hit the cover off the ball, but they're also going to be able to drop in hits and run the base. And they're not the typical middle of the order that you think of, that it's a bunch of just, hulky guys that aren't really going to run that much, but they're going to hit the ball a country mile. They can do a little bit of everything. But yeah, Will Benson's my dude. Like I said in the preseason, I thought he was going to become an everyday player for this team after they got him from the Guardians. He started off super rough, but he has been so good ever since he was called back up at the end of May. He was sent down for a couple of weeks just to kind of figure out what's going on with him. And ever since the end of May, he has been an all-star level performer. Wow. And he hits in the 8th or the 9th spot on our routine basis. We always joke, Craig, is like he's the league's best number 9 hitter. And it's kind of like whenever Jamal Crawford was winning 6th man of the year in the NBA every year. It's like it's because he's not a 6th man. Like Will Benson is not a number 9 hitter. It's just that's where he ends up in the Reds lineup. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this series really shakes up, because I think these two teams are super talented. I think the Blue Jays are a few years ahead of where the Reds are right now. The Blue Jays are where the Reds want to be in a year or two, and because of that, I want to get your take as to how the last couple of years have gone. Maybe you can give us some insight as to rooting for a young team that's on the come up. That's what we're going to talk about coming up next. Before we jump into that, wanted to remind you can catch every pitch of the Reds and Blue Jays hometown broadcast on SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Reds or Blue Jays. And thanks for joining us here on this Locked On Reds, Locked On Blue Jays crossover. We are breaking down a series that hasn't happened very often in the past, but will happen at least once a year moving forward. So excited to see that. And one of the reasons that I'm very excited to watch this Blue Jays team is because of the talent that has been built in this core. And as the cores kind of come up, Craig, these last few years, and yes, playing in the AL East is much different than playing in the NL Central, but how have the last couple of years been? Has there been moments where you wanted to pull your hair out or pull your hair? No, I'm just kidding. But how have the last few years been as a Blue Jays fan?
It's interesting. I'm really glad that you highlighted the differences in the divisions, because that is going to be a night and day difference when it comes to the Blue Jays growth and the Reds growth. The Blue Jays growth was what I do appreciate the most about Shapiro and Atkins, the current regime here, is that they have built a sustainable contender. It's been a few years now since the Blue Jays have been a playoff contender. I would bet you cash money they'll be a playoff contender next year and the year after, to be honest, because of this
Okay.
core that's been built here. Similar things happening in Cincinnati, but for the Blue Jays, building that core was never going to be sufficient because of the American League East. You were going to have to spend money because everyone else was spending money. Well, we talked about Hyunjin Ryu earlier. Even Scott Boras will tell you that was the indicator that the Blue Jays were back in business, that Hyunjin Ryu contract. The very next offseason, George Springer. The very next offseason, they re-up a year early with Jose Barrios. This offseason, Chris Bassett. So I don't know that the Reds will necessarily need to go that route. At some point, I do think you're going to need to spend some money to bring some people in. Don't get me wrong on that. But I just think from the AL Central standpoint, just building, I think you can build a sustainable contender through your farm system, and then to go to the next level. So be competitive in the Central, then to go to the next level when we're talking about winning a playoff series, being a legitimate contender. I do think the Reds will have to spend some money, but that has been the best part of the last couple of years for the Toronto Blue Jays, is it is a perennial contender. So I do have my hats off to Shapiro and Atkins for that, but I definitely acknowledge that a huge part of that, Jeff, is that what is there, 19, 20 wild card teams now, wild card spots now? Like so I do acknowledge that that's in there, that's part of this scenario, because I don't think the Reds in the National League are going to be wild card contenders. I think the path to the playoffs will be winning the division. So it is going to be a little bit different as far as that growth there. But absolutely, yes, if anything, I may say, I mean, if it's possible, I mean, fan is short for fanatic. So I get that this is easier said than done, but if you can temper your your expectations, and I say that because here we are. We just talked earlier. You were stunned that I would take Ellie over Vlad. I mean, Vlad is not progressing towards that huge contract that he thought he was going to want, right? So there could be steps backwards. Kevin Biggio is red hot right now, but Kevin Biggio was a downright four-letter word in the Blue Jay fan base. Remember, that was Biggio, Bichette, and Vlad that all came up together. So
Mhm.
I guess, long story short, I guess, Jeff, basically is be prepared to understand that not all the prospects that you're really excited about right now, not all of them are going to work out. A, and B, what you're going to see is that's actually going to be okay. That's actually going to be okay, especially if you have that commitment from the ownership that when the time is right, when you've built something sustainable, you are going to be pleased with the budget. We are going to open up the purse strings when that time is right. That's what happened. You think about Shapiro and Atkins, they built that sustainable contender in Cleveland.
Yes.
Right as the playoff window opened, here's Rogers, the Blue Jays owner's online too, saying, "Hey, Mark Shapiro, you know he went through all those lean years in Cleveland. Oh my God, sleepless nights. You finally built it. You're finally seeing the fruits of your labor. How'd you like to come to Canada and do that whole heavy lifting thing all over again?" They must have been clear to him that, hey, we do need you to do some of the heavy lifting. We'll be honest, the first couple seasons we will need that, but once you've got it to be a sustainable contender, you're going to be thrilled at what your budget's going to be. So I think that aspect has to be similar in Cincinnati. At some point, you're going to have to cut a contract to somebody. And what I'm excited about from you, Jeff, on Cincinnati's standpoint is because I like a lot Chase Petty. I like a lot
Yes.
in the Cincinnati organization. I think it could almost be like a Tampa Bay organization, in that I could see you guys making a key trade this offseason for one of these younger players and not even noticing, because for the Blue Jays, I would say the young players coming up, it was more quality. But the Reds, you guys have some quantity as well. You guys have some guys, like guys plural, to get excited about. So I think similar situations, yes, in that your excitement window is just opening now, just like it did for the Blue Jays a couple years back. But your path to contention in Cincinnati, I think, is going to look a little bit different than it did in Toronto. And really, as you said, as you started out by saying, one of the big things here, one of the big factors is that division. I mean, the Reds could be ready to be big boys in that division much quicker than the Blue Jays ever could have been big boys in the AL East.
That uh, that's on the money, dude. Because like I keep looking at different fans and their responses to what is going on with the Reds right now, and especially at the trade deadline, there were so many people that were just like, "What do they want for this player? We'll give them whatever they want." It's like, no, this
Ooh,
is not the point in the Reds rebuild where you start. just overpaying for expiring contracts and overpaying for aging veterans who are either at their peak or coming down from their peak. Like, this is the kind of team that, like you said, with the Blue Jays, can build sustainable success. And that's something that Nick Kroll has said, much to the chagrin of a lot of people, because the way he worded it, he said, we're going to get rid of peaks and valleys. And he said, oh yeah, who wants peaks? We don't want a peak. Like, people took it all the wrong way because, well, we're in the middle of a long series of unfortunate events for this Reds team. But I think we're finally coming out of that. And kind of like you said, like, to build a team in the AL East is super different from building a team in the NL Central. Like, the way that the Brewers look, the way that the Cubs look, the Reds could be on top of this division for multiple years, and that's only if they just stay the course. They fill in the gaps, they find the margins where they need to get better, and they get better that way. And I don't necessarily know that we've had that one contract that really lets us know that ownership is ready to spend. They finally just signed someone to a long-term deal. They signed Hunter Green to a long-term deal this season. And we saw that and we said, okay, them doing this right now is a signal that they're going to do this for multiple different players, but they have not there's not been any rumors. There's not really been any movement toward another contract with anyone else at this point, because at the time, the ready-made next dude was probably Jonathan India. But ever since then, it's kind of become clear that he might actually be the extra man once you really sit down and look at this roster in the offseason. So we'll kind of see how all of that plays out. But just your perspective on that is really what I want to get. And that was right there on the money. That's right, kind of what I was hoping you to say, because after a beer or two at the ballpark while I'm watching the game, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm just like, you know what? What if not everybody just constantly gets better every year? Like, what if there's a guy that takes a step back, like a Vlad or something like that? And how are people going to handle that? Because do you see a couple of strikeouts from a guy on a given day, and there's a couple of fans that are, yeah, get him out of here. We want somebody else. Come on. And you're like, baseball is a patient game, and I think not a lot of fans really understand that.
And I'll say as well, Jeff, when you talk about the fans that really wanted, hey, what do you want for this player? We'll give you anything. Boy, oh boy, I would massively caution against that. There is no trade on the table at this year's trade deadline where the Cincinnati Reds become better than the LA Dodgers. There was no trade on the table at the trade deadline this season where the Cincinnati Reds became better than the Atlanta Braves. So this was not the time to pull a trigger like that for the Cincinnati Reds. It's going to come, and that's exciting for the Reds. It's sooner rather than later. Like you said earlier, hey, this contention window thing, this is pretty cool. It's come quicker than we thought it would come, but it's a contention window. Your regime is not in charge of the 2023 Cincinnati Reds. Your regime is in charge of the Cincinnati Reds, right? The whole pie, the whole thing.
Right. We're not looking at a window in time of an MLB The Show franchise. We're looking at everything. And that is a beautiful way to end today's crossover. Thank you, everyone, for checking out. Thanks to all everydayers for hanging out for this Locked On Reds, Locked On Blue Jays crossover. Before we get out of here, one more reminder: you can catch every pitch of the Reds and Blue Jays hometown broadcast on SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Reds or Blue Jays. Make sure that you keep it Locked On Blue Jays and Locked On Reds. We're going to have you covered as we go through the weekend, and you come back on Monday. We're going to give you in-depth recaps. What happened at Great American Ballpark? Did Vladimir Guerrero Jr. eat any Skyline chili? Will Hunter Green have a bunch of strikeouts on Sunday? Who knows? We'll see how everything goes. Make sure you keep it Locked On Reds and Locked On Blue Jays, because we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.